Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Lighthouse, good to see you again. Let me, first of all, add my voice to two of my colleagues. One, I completely agree with Senator Bennett that the President's language about our allies, Mexico, Canada, EU, there are serious repercussions here. And I know you don't probably have access to his tweetage, but some restraint would be terribly appropriate. And I also agree with Senator Cantwell that you said you support the Export-Import Bank. Let's get it functioning. The sooner, the better. What I want to talk about is something that falls in your lane, but not entirely in your lane. And that is, I think, the incredible growing threat of China. You outlined some aspects of the China 2025 plan. What I didn't hear you outline was areas, and the ranking member and I serve on the Intelligence Committee, that China has an extraordinarily organized plan around investment in artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing, where their goal is to leapfrog ahead of today's technologies and not be our equal, but bypass us. We've talked a lot, and I think, again, for many administrations, we've allowed China to steal our intellectual property with virtually no pushback. We now have an unprecedented, organized effort on Chinese investors to invest actually in early-stage companies that we've never seen before in as organized a way, and companies are not aware of the concerns I believe they should have. I think we see, in an unprecedented way, Chinese use their students who come over to this country and then, again, come back, oftentimes with intellectual property in, again, an organized way that didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. I have huge concerns about the number of American companies, frankly, that have been so anxious to access the Chinese market that they give up their intellectual property, they give up their source codes in ways they would never do for entering into any other nation. And you made an announcement yesterday, the administration did, about some areas they were going to try to concentrate on and trying to take on IP. I'd like you to spell that out a little bit more. But what I'm concerned about is, quietly, in some of these companies like Huawei and Alibaba, people may be aware of, but there are 20-plus Chinese tech companies, all with valuations north of $20 billion. Senator Cornyn, I'm trying to work with him as well. We're trying to reform some of the CFIUS process. But the CFIUS process alone will not get us there, where some of these companies have such breadth and scope they can enter into our American market directly. Now, again, this is a little bit outside of your lane, but I would hope, rather than simply focusing on aluminum and steel, that you would look in a much more organized way about the national security concerns, the protection of our intellectual property vis-a-vis China, and how we can have a not just trade policy, but a whole of government policy to frankly warn in ways American companies before they allow, I believe, some of these Chinese tech companies to take over our markets in ways that they operate on totally different principles than any true market-based economy. They have a market plan. They have industrial planning in ways that is exponentially greater, not something we should repeat, but how is the administration and how is your lane going to help take on this issue?
Well, I would say, first of all, that it is very encouraging to hear your description of the problem. I totally agree with it. I think in the final analysis, if you say what keeps me awake at night, that's what keeps me awake at night. If you say what's going to define whether or not I've done my job or you've done yours, it's going to be how we deal with this issue. So it's very encouraging. Whenever I hear it, I always think, why doesn't the Intelligence Committee take so many of these other senators who are not on it and make them sit in the skiff and say, here, look at this stuff. And I think if you did, we'd have a lot more people who are interested and sympathetic to your view. It strikes me as almost impossible to be exposed, for a smart person to be exposed to what you're exposed to in that other committee and not conclude the way you conclude. So I completely agree with it. I would say it's because of that that we focus as our first major thing. We have NAFTA. We have, of course, the steel thing is what it is. We have cases that were brought, but from my point of view, the most important single thing was this 301 on IP, and it was because exactly I start and end precisely where you are. And I agree with you on this issue. I hope that senators spend time on it, this issue of putting $1 million into 10 little things and have one of them pop up, and now you're in a position where it's likely a joint use technology. It's going to have whatever the military effects is, but it's going to have all these effects in terms of our economy going forward, developed in the United States and gone from the United States. So our remedy will, in the 301, will deal with that, I believe, in ways that you'll find helpful. And as we announce it and move forward, I hope that you'll engage with the Secretary of Treasury, specifically just person to person on this issue, this issue of investment that you just mentioned.
Mr. Chairman, let me just add one quick comment. Just some of the low-hanging fruit, and this is outside of your lane. We had a 700,000 person backlog on security clearances. Yet what ought to be one of our top priorities is making sure the chief security officer of every Fortune 1000 company has a security clearance so we can share the vulnerabilities that are out there and some of the nefarious means that some of these Chinese tech companies are going to use.
Thank you.